There are moments in sport that transcend the scoreboard entirely. Moments where something happens that has nothing to do with a match result or a ranking point or a trophy, and yet somehow it hits harder than any of those things ever could. What happened outside the design center Linz in Austria was one of those moments. And if you weren't paying attention, if you were just scrolling past the headlines and the highlight clips, you might have missed what it actually meant. So, let's slow it down. Let's go back to that morning, to the cold Austrian spring air, to the thousands of people who had gathered outside a tennis venue in a city of just over 200,000 residents. And let's talk about why a young woman from the Philippines reaching into a duffel bag made grown adults burst into tears and made Rafael Nadal shake his head in the players' lounge and say he had never seen anything like it in over 2 decades in professional tennis. Because that's where this story starts. Not on the court, not in a press conference. Outside, in the cold, with a crowd that had been waiting since before sunrise. Now, to understand the scale of what descended on Linz, you have to understand that this tournament, the Upper Austria Ladies Linz Open, has been running for 35 years. 35 years of professional women's tennis. Serena Williams has played there. Maria Sharapova has played there. Angelique Kerber, Coco Gauff, some of the biggest names the sport has ever produced have walked through that venue. And in all those 35 years, tournament officials had never seen anything remotely like what Alex brought with her. An estimated 35,000 Filipino fans had made their way to Linz specifically for this tournament. Think about that number against the backdrop of a city with 200,000 people. They came from Vienna, where Austria's largest Filipino community is concentrated. They came from Munich and Zurich and Milan, from anywhere across Europe where a flight connection made it remotely possible to get to Austria in time. Some of them had been planning this trip for weeks. Some had saved money for months. Some had rearranged their work schedules, arranged childcare, booked the cheapest accommodation they could find, all for the chance to be in the same building as Alex Eala. They arrived with Philippine flags tied around their shoulders like capes. They stayed outside overnight in temperatures that had no business being endured voluntarily. They kept the city awake with chants that the locals had never heard before and probably didn't fully understand, but which carried an emotional weight that needed no translation. Local restaurants, sensing an opportunity and also genuinely wanting to welcome these visitors, started adding Filipino dishes to their menus. Hotels that had never thought twice about their lobby decor suddenly had flowers arranged that meant something specific to Filipino culture. The city of Linz was, for a few days, transformed into something it had never been. And none of this was coordinated. None of it was the result of a marketing campaign or a carefully planned promotional push. It was entirely organic, entirely driven by people who love Alex in a way that goes beyond what the word fan typically conveys. The tournament had moved to indoor clay for the first time in its history this year, which is itself a significant detail we'll come back to. But the surface change was almost secondary to what was happening outside the building before a single ball had even been struck. The practice session was scheduled for 10 in the morning. By 8 o'clock, the area around the venue was already completely packed. People pressed against the barriers, phones held up, voices rising and falling in waves of anticipation. At 9:47, Alex's team van pulled into the car park. The sound that went up from that crowd when the van door opened was the kind of noise that you feel in your chest before you consciously register it as sound. Alex stepped out. She smiled. The smile that anyone who has watched her this past year would recognize immediately, because it's not a performed smile, not the kind athletes sometimes put on for public appearances. It's the real thing, the kind that reaches her eyes and makes you feel like she's genuinely happy to be exactly where she is. She waved. She signed a few autographs at the barrier. She started walking toward the players' entrance. And then she stopped. She turned around. She walked back to the van. She reached inside and pulled out a large duffel bag. What came out of that bag is what everyone is still talking about. Stack after stack of white jerseys. Her own brand. The Ayala line that she had launched in the weeks following her extraordinary Miami Open run. The jerseys featuring the sampaguita flower, the national flower of the Philippines, embroidered on the chest, with a subtle trace of the Philippine flag's colors worked into the trim. These were not tournament merchandise. They were not sponsor handouts. They were her shirts, her brand, something she had created herself as a deliberate celebration of where she came from and who she was playing for. She walked to the barrier and handed the first one to a young girl standing in the front row. The girl clutched the shirt to her chest, and her face just fell apart in the best possible way, the way faces do when something happens that you are not emotionally prepared for. And Alex kept going. She handed out another shirt and another and another. The crowd began surging forward, not violently, not dangerously, but with the kind of desperate energy that comes from people who have traveled thousands of miles and spent money they carefully saved and rearranged their lives, all to be close to someone who means something profound to them. Security moved in to try and form a barrier, and Alex essentially waved them off. The message was clear. These people are fine. Let them come. For 20 minutes she stood at that barrier and just gave. Her hands kept moving. Her smile never left. Shirt after shirt disappeared into the crowd, each one received like it was something sacred. Because to the people receiving them, it kind of was. When the bag was finally empty, she looked out at the crowd that was still hundreds deep, still waving flags, still calling her name. And her eyes filled up. She mouthed the words, "I'm sorry, I don't have enough." And the crowd that hadn't received a shirt, didn't react with disappointment. They reacted with more noise, more warmth, more chanting. Because they understood something important. The shirt was never really the point. What she had given them was attention, presence. She had seen them. In a world where athletes are increasingly managed, packaged, kept behind glass, Alex had turned around, gone back to the van, and made a completely spontaneous decision to give away pieces of herself to people who needed to feel that the connection they felt toward her was real and mutual. It was real, and it was mutual. The sampaguita flower on those jerseys is worth understanding, because Alex didn't choose it casually. The sampaguita is the national flower of the Philippines. It's small and white and fragrant, and it grows in conditions that would suppress other plants. In Filipino culture, it carries meanings that have accumulated over generations: resilience, purity, endurance. It blooms when it has every reason not to. If you wanted to design a symbol for what Alex's journey has represented, not just to tennis fans, but to Filipinos around the world who watched her climb from ranked 140 to the top 50 in a single season, you would probably land on something very close to that flower. The sampaguita on the jersey isn't decoration. It's a statement. When fans wear that shirt, they're not just supporting a tennis player. They're claiming something for themselves. They're saying this person is from us, this story belongs to us, and we are proud. For Filipinos living in Europe, many of them far from home, many of them navigating the particular loneliness that comes with building a life in a country that wasn't the one you grew up in, that jersey is a thread back to something. It's a conversation starter between strangers who suddenly aren't strangers anymore. It's a reminder that belonging doesn't require geography. That community can find you wherever you are if the right person holds it together. Alex understands this. She's talked about it openly, about the privilege of standing in front of people who see themselves in her, about coming from a country where she watched people struggle, where she developed an awareness of what it means to have resources and opportunities that others don't. Her gratitude is not performed. It's woven into the way she moves through her career, the way she stops when she could keep walking, the way she turns back to the van when she could have just gone inside. There's a quote she's given in different forms across different interviews that keeps coming back in moments like this. She says she always makes it a point to be grateful, that she's seen serious poverty, serious struggle, and even though she hasn't lived through it personally, she understands enough to appreciate what she has. That appreciation is not a talking point. It's a lived thing, and it showed up in Lynn's in a duffel bag full of white shirts. Now, when Rafael Nadal saw the footage from the venue, his response was worth paying attention to. This is a man who spent 22 Grand Slams worth of years watching the sport at the closest possible range. He has seen Roger Federer work a crowd with effortless charm. He has seen Serena Williams command arenas in ways that felt almost mythological. He has seen the full spectrum of athlete and fan relationships across 2 decades at the very top of the game. And when he watched Alex walk to that barrier and start handing out her own shirts to people who were crying before they even touched the fabric, he said, simply, that he had never seen anything like it. That's not a throwaway line from someone known for hyperbole. Nadal is precise. He chooses his words carefully. When he says he's never seen anything like something, he means it against the full weight of everything he actually has seen. He spoke about his own relationship with Spanish fans, about the way they would travel hundreds of kilometers to watch him play, the way the flags would fill the stands, the way the chants would sustain him through the hardest matches. He said Alex has that connection. The same thing he had, the same thing Federer had. And then he said something that landed harder than anything else. He said it's not something you can teach. It's not something you can buy. It's something you're born with. Nadal has been watching Alex develop since she was 13 years old, arriving at his academy in Manacor as a scholarship student from Manila who barely spoke Spanish and knew nobody. 7 years of training under his roof, absorbing the philosophy and the discipline and the work ethic that produced 22 Grand Slam titles. He has seen her struggle. He has seen her doubt herself. He has seen her lose matches that hurt and win matches that nobody expected. He has celebrated her publicly at every major milestone, her Miami semifinal run, her first WTA title in Guadalajara, her historic rise to number 50, the first Filipino player ever to crack the top 50 in WTA history. And now he watched her do something on a cold morning in Austria that reminded him of why he believed in her from the beginning. "It is beyond anything I could have imagined when she first walked through our doors," he said. "She is not just a tennis player. She is an inspiration." He also said something else that matters, particularly given the noise that has followed Alex throughout her eyes. He said her ranking doesn't define her, her critics don't define her, and that her value cannot be measured in points alone. That's Nadal defending her, clearly and on the record, against the specific criticism that has followed her, the suggestion from certain corners that her results don't match the attention she receives, that the crowds and the coverage are disproportionate to where she sits in the rankings. Nadal has heard that argument, and he's telling you what he thinks of it. Now the lens turns